what we've heard from the Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei, he just moments ago he had a new statement. It says that we pledge to avenge the blood of the martyred leader and all martyrs of these two wars from the criminals. These criminals will bury their desire for a peaceful death in their bed. Here many people are arguing that Iran is trying to assassinate Donald Trump. Even Donald Trump himself came out with a tweet saying that 1,000 missiles are already locked and loaded to be and aimed at the Islamic Republic of Iran, with thousands more to immediately follow. This is the atmosphere. When it comes to Donald Trump, and when it comes to the revenge, and we know the people in Iran were so much, they're angry. You see the flags in the funeral procession, and the people don't want, they want to fight back, they want to seek something. What is that thing? Is that the way that they're, because when you translate Persian to English, there has to be some sort, in my opinion, some sort of misunderstanding. What is that? What is the meaning of the new statement of the supreme leader of Iran?
Well, first of all, as we've been discussing together before the show, for us in Islam and in particular Shia Islam, justice is very important. It is key. And that is really the context in which uh, resistance to the oppressor and support for the oppressed and the disenfranchised, that's where it comes from. So when Iran supports Cuba or it supports Nicaragua or Venezuela or South Africa under apartheid, the resistance there, or when it supports the Palestinian cause, uh, it is based on that sense of justice, and that justice is not something that you can compromise. You're both uh, locally and internationally, uh, at the local level, at the international level, it's ideological, and so there's no way you can shy away from this concept. Uh, Therefore, for the Iranians, Trump is obviously a war criminal, and so is Netanyahu, and so is his entire entourage, and so is the Israeli regime from top to bottom. These people have carried out crimes against humanity, whether it's the person who pressed the button to slaughter the 168 little kids in Minab, or whether it was the officer who coordinated the strikes, and or whether it was the political leadership that made the decision. They're all war criminals, just like the Nazis. They're no different than the Nazis. And to be very blunt, uh, Western diplomats, they are like Nazi diplomats. I'm using the Nazi because it's just one example. I could say Saddam Hussein's diplomats. I mean, the tyrants throughout history. But the worst of the tyrants are really in North America and of course occupied Palestine, because I during the height of the genocide, and the genocide is ongoing. Every day they're killing Palestinians and they're killing kids every single day as we speak. But the genocide today is unique because it is taking place in front of our eyes. They are bragging about it in among themselves, and the Western journalists are hiding it from us, or they've been justifying it, or they've been apologists for the genocide for almost 3 years now. So diplomats, they are like Nazi diplomats. Western diplomats, any embassy, in my opinion, you see anywhere in the world, those diplomats inside, whether they're Norwegian or they're uh, German or British or Canadian or Australian, they're Nazis. They're Nazi diplomats. Again, some people, I'm not going to focus. I don't mean, I'm just giving the Nazis, and you can say Saddam Hussein's diplomats. You can say Zionist diplomats. You can use any historical um, example that's similar, that's carried out genocide. So Western journalists, they're like German Nazi journalists. Now, again, I'm not saying that British journalists in the empire were any better than the Nazis. The British Empire did to the non-white world what the Germans did to the white did to Europe. The starvation in India. Uh, um, Churchill used chemical weapons in Iraq. So, I mean, the reason why Churchill is seen as the good guy and Hitler the bad guy is because the crimes committed by Hitler were to white people, and for Churchill it was to brown. I mean, go and see what Churchill said about Indians, the racist language, and of course the results of that sort of mentality. It was clear. For go ask any Indian who knows a thing or two about their history. And I mean, when I mean India, I mean the Indian subcontinent, the entire subcontinent. It's just not. It's not simply the country. So for the Iranians, there has to be justice. So for all American leaders and the Israeli leaders and those who supported them, the Nuremberg trials are essential. So that's clear as day. Now, some may say, well, they may not be able to set up such trials. In any case, that's another issue altogether. The point is that this is about justice, and that these people have slaughtered, they've carried out 2 unprovoked wars. The Western media has tried to justify it, and Iran is not going uh, um, to allow the United States or its allies to get away with it. So they're saying that these people must be punished for their actions. So now the Iranian state has not been assigned to do anything in particular, but that is the mentality across the country. We've seen in Mashhad, in Tehran, and Qom, and in Iraq, and Karbala, and Najaf, the slogans were clear. So it's not bloodlust, or it's not just rage. Not at all. In fact, I think by now many people criticize Iran for being too patient, and which I don't agree with. But the Iranians are very patient when it comes to dealing with their adversaries. So this has nothing to do with bloodlust. This has to do with justice, and it is a deterrence to make sure that this sort of thing does not happen again in the future. We live in a world where the West, for centuries, has gone out and destroyed country after country, and of course the U.S. empire more recently, in particular. And they slaughter, they destroy, they crush country after country, and then they walk away and they continue with their lives. And the people in the global South, they have to live with the destruction for generations. So the Iranians are saying, no, we're not going to accept that.
Yeah. The new sanctions, the sanctions on Iranian oil sector or on the energy sector, they're back on Iran again, Professor Marandi, which is totally against the clause or the paragraph 9 of the MOU. So yesterday we had the Qatari delegations going to Tehran, talking with the officials. What is the situation right now between Iran and the United States?
Well, you and I we've discussed this numerous times. The Iranians never believed that the Americans were going to comply with the MOU. The Americans are deceitful. They've always been deceitful. They're dishonest. They're unreliable. And so the Iranians have within the context of the MOU, have enormous leverage. The Americans are virtually, I mean, they are violating every one of their commitments except for one. They not only have they returned not only have they restored the sanctions on Iranian oil and gas or energy exports, as you rightly pointed out, but they've added even new sanctions. That's another violation of the MOU. So these are 2 violations. Trump is constantly threatening to destroy Iran and kill Iranian leaders, kill negotiators. These are all violations of the deal. It's in the MOU, these threats. The United States has not forced the Israeli regime to stop the slaughter in Lebanon, nor to retreat. That's another violation. The United States has not turned over Iranian assets that were stolen by the Americans. That was supposed to happen at the very start. They stalled and stalled as we expected. That's another violation. So wherever you look, the Americans, at whatever aspect of it, the only thing that they haven't violated yet is the lifting of the siege. That's the only thing left. And of course, if they do that, then the Iranians are going to shut things down. And we're going to go back to a very swift energy crisis. We're swiftly going to go to the peak of the energy crisis, because the four and a half months of shortages that have been accumulated have not gone away. And right now, I don't know exactly where things stand, but the situation hasn't improved. It's not as if there's like excess capacity of oil and other products that are being taken and added to the market, and that the shortages are dying down. So if there's another war, if there's another siege, then it will not take 4 months to get where we are now. It'll take, weeks for us to get where we are now to a global economic collapse. We are pretty close, according to Trump himself. So the Iranians, in return, in return or in response to the American violations, they have huge leverage, and that is in the Persian Gulf. So what if the Americans are doing in the Strait of Hormuz? They're carrying out another violation. They're violating Article 5. And what is that? That is the Americans in Article 5, the reopening and the normalization of the Strait of Hormuz is to be carried out by the Iranians. And then later, with coordination with the Omanis, they'll plan the future of the Strait, but that we'll leave that aside. So the Iranians are supposed to normalize. So what have the Americans done? They'd opened up their own corridor, and they're passing ships through. Why? Because they want to undermine Iran's leverage, so that Iran has no leverage and the Americans can violate all of their commitments. And the Iranians would be unable to do anything in return. So the Iranians, they're pushing back. For weeks, the Iranians warned ships, but didn't do much about it. For a couple of weeks, they warned the Americans. They carried out some light strikes, but then a few days ago, 3-4 days ago, the Iranians hit 3 ships pretty hard, or maybe more, but I know of 3 major important ships that were hit. And then the Americans were angry. Why? Why were the Americans angry? Because we know that the Americans were doing this to undermine Iran's leverage, and so that the Americans could undermine the whole MOU and declare some sort of victory. So the Iranians are more than prepared to go to war, and they will not allow the Americans to control the Strait of Hormuz. And ironically, what Trump is doing is he's preventing the normalization of the oil market and the energy market and the other markets that are influenced by the Persian Gulf region. Why? Because if he had carried out his obligations, by now the Iranians would have almost normalized trade through the Strait of Hormuz. The only thing that is holding normalization back are U.S. violations and the U.S. attempt to undermine Iran's authority in the Strait. That's what's holding things back. So if Trump had not done if they were not doing what they're doing, the global markets would be better off right now as we speak. But this is the United States. It's heavily influenced by the Zionist regime. The Zionist regime does not want the MOU to be fulfilled. It's in the interest of the American people, no doubt, but not in the interest of Netanyahu. So Netanyahu doesn't care if we have a global economic crisis. He doesn't care if there's a global economic collapse. He doesn't care if it devastates the US economy. He wants to remain in power, and he and his fanatical allies. So we are where we are. And the Americans are making threats against Iran, but Iran is not going to be deterred. And I think Ayatollah Sayyid Mujtaba Khamenei's statement about justice and revenge is a part of this. It's also sending a message that don't think that we're going to back down. Don't think that we're going to be more conciliatory. In fact, the funerals, the tens of millions of people who participated in the funeral are sending a strong message that Iran is going to be very tough. And Iraq. Many millions of people participated in Iraq, in Najaf, in the holy cities of Najaf and Karbala. It's very interesting. American journalists speak about, right after the funeral in Iraq, they speak about how Iran's uh, influence in Iraq is dying down. Literally after the funeral in Iraq, they could never muster 1,000th of the number of people who went to the streets and expressed such and they were with such an outpour of emotions. They could never do that in Iraq or anywhere else. So another thing that the funerals did was it shows that, because at the beginning of the war they were saying Iran would fall, and then when it didn't fall, they said, well, if Iran just lasts, they win. And Iran didn't just last; it didn't just survive. It hit back day and night till the end of the war, just like it's doing now. In Western media, whenever the Americans strike, the Western media says they've destroyed all sorts of Iranian assets, but they don't say anything about what Iran does in return. They hide that. And they exaggerate what the Americans do because most of Iranian assets are underground. They don't strike anything. I mean, they've been bombing Iran day and night for 40 days and getting nowhere. Do you think that the Iranians are like they say they bombed drone depots? Iran doesn't have depots lying around on the ground. The Americans are actually more vulnerable because there are no underground bases in the Persian Gulf, on the other side of the Persian Gulf. There are no underground bases in Jordan or in Israel. So when Iran fires missiles and strikes targets, the damage is much greater because the assets are all out in the open. But the Americans use B-52 bombers to bomb drone and missile cities, and yet the drones and missiles keep being launched. So the Iranians and the in these clashes that we see in the Persian Gulf, you would think from the American narrative that the Americans have the upper hand, Western media, but it's, I think, the other way around. I think the damage that the Iranians are doing to the Americans each time is much greater than what the Americans are doing, and that's why there are clashes. I mean, if they were successful, the Americans would be doing it 24 hours a day. But it's not working well for them. And it's also preventing oil and gas and other goods from leaving the Persian Gulf. The last 4 days that we've seen a sharp decline in ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. So, in my opinion, Trump is stuck. He has no good solutions. He can go back to war, but it would lead to a global economic depression. What we were discussing throughout the 40 days, 39, 40 days, way back when, and during the siege warfare. We're not far from an economic collapse. So if he wages war, that happens. If he starts targeting Iranian critical infrastructure, Persian Gulf, it's all destroyed. And we are in July. Your viewers right now, all they have to do is go Google Dubai temperature and humidity, and they'll figure out that it's not a good time for them to lose all their electricity. Or Saudi Arabia. And all of their assets are right alongside the coast. These are desert countries. Unlike Iran, Iran is not a desert country. Iran has forests, it has mountains, it has, right now, I don't know about at this moment, but I think it was yesterday, the last time I looked at the mountains above Tehran, there's still a bit of snow. There's still a bit of snow at the top, here and there. I think I saw, maybe I looked the day before yesterday or yesterday. So Iran is not a desert. Iran has deserts, but Iran has many mountains, and thus snow, and thus rivers and agriculture, and because of the sanctions, Iran is very much self-sufficient, so it has many small industries all over the country. But these countries have all their assets, huge uh, complexes and huge industries and petrochemical plants and refineries and so on, all of them alongside the coast. Desalination plants. So if the Americans go after critical infrastructure, Iran will take these out. So there isn't a good option for Trump when it comes to war. Does he want to continue with these strikes against Iran? Perhaps, but it will only create further crisis. Fewer ships will pass through. Insurance companies will be more wary of getting involved. Shipping companies will be more wary of getting involved. More ships will be hit, and that will only make things worse. But the pace of decline will be slower. The only thing left for Trump to do is to implement the MOU. But will he do that? He would never willingly do such a thing. The Israelis, the Zionist lobby will never let him do that. So the Iranians want to keep the pressure up until finally the United States comes to a point where it sees that it has no option. Now, will we get there, or when will we get there, or is that even possible? No one knows, because no one has been able to dislodge the Zionist lobby from power in the United States, and no one has ever been able to, I think, how should I put it, to create a wedge between the decision makers in the United States and the Zionist lobby, where the decision makers in the United States would at some point say, well, we have priorities that are critical for us right now. We cannot pursue your Zionist priorities because of an imminent economic collapse. So no one knows what's going to happen. But the funeral has shown the extraordinary high degree of legitimacy of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is not because when they said if Iran survives, they win the war. Iran didn't just survive; it won the war. And then they would say in the West, because they don't want to admit that the Islamic Republic of Iran is not a regime, as they love to call it. They would say, "Oh yes, this is a rally around the flag effect." Right? Were these funerals a rally around the flag effect? The tens of millions of people who came to the streets, that's a rally around the flag effect? It's much, 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 much deeper than that. It shows the extraordinary high degree of legitimacy that the Islamic Republic has in the eyes of the people, and the depth of that legitimacy. And this is unique. The West doesn't have that sort of legitimacy. Whether they like it or not, they can pretend that they're more legitimate. They're not. They can never muster such emotions and crowds. When it was very difficult for my skin is peeling, my ears, and I was under like the sun for like 8-9 hours. And then you had millions of people, you were stuck in the crowd, everyone was wearing black. Many women who don't normally wear the chador, they wore the chador. Many women who wouldn't wear black wore black. Many women who didn't wear the hijab wore the hijab. Men and women, everyone, and many carrying flags. And believe me, I didn't carry any flags, but believe me, these in that heat, carrying a flag for hours must be quite a burden, or carrying your children, or in any case, the point is that this is not a rally around the flag effect. And Western journalists and pundits and so-called experts and politicians and diplomats shouldn't try to explain away the reality in a way in which it benefits their narrative. Their narrative has been destroyed. The Islamic Republic of Iran and the axis of resistance are terribly powerful, are extraordinarily powerful, and they're very popular. Doesn't mean that Iran is a utopia. In fact, the very people who went to the millions of people who participated in Tehran, well over 10 million people, These are the same people who, when you, Nemo, when you come to Tehran and get into a taxi, or when you sit on in a bus, or when you get in the metro, if you sit beside them, many of them will complain, many of them will criticize, many will attack, many will show their frustration over different things, the economy, and so on. So Western journalists, when they come to Iran, they're looking for these things and they think that this is a sign of discontent that will, no, this is, in Iran, we have freedom of speech, contrary to what they pretend. In the countries that are aligned with them, there's no freedom of speech. And increasingly in the West, there's less and less freedom of speech, as we're seeing over Palestine and the new laws that are devising with regards to Iran, Russia, China, and so on. So, I mean, I don't know if you saw this media group. They use clips from RT, and now they could go to jail for doing so. Like 4 clips over like a few years ago. That's the state of freedom in Europe. So I don't see any good options for Trump, but I don't see Trump making the right decision either.